joining us to talk about college football as we're getting set for a big college football season here on the Rich Eisen Show is national columnist from Yahoo Sports, Pat Forde. How are you, Pat?
Yeah, I'm doing well, Rich. Happy football season to you.
Happy football season to you too. We made it, Pat. We made it. You know,
we did.
No, I know you do everything for Yahoo, including college hoops, but you know, nothing quite beats the football playing season, don't you think, Pat?
No, it's great. You know, I mean, after a long summer of you know, kind of piddling through the minutia of baseball season, it is the beginning of college football season feels like a big celebration. I've always said that the beginning of college football and the end of college basketball are as good as it gets, I think.
So let's get into this. The Alabama-Florida State game. How do you see this one playing out? And it's so difficult to, I guess, to try and make heads or tails of these games because there is no preseason. There are no scrimmages to check out. It's just kick it off and let's see how these kids do. What do you think about Florida State and Alabama, Pat?
It should be a slobber knocker. You know, I mean, there can be a ton of talent on both sides of the ball. You know, Alabama, I think, is going to be an improved offensive team and probably not as good a defensive team as we saw last year. Hard to be as good as they were defensively up until at least they played Clemson. But they lost a lot of guys to the NFL off that defense. They were younger on that side. Have had a couple of personnel issues as well here in preseason. So, you know, I expect Florida State to actually be able to move the ball and do some scoring, but I don't know whether Florida State will be able to stop Alabama. You know, I think it's going to be a relatively high-scoring game, and it should be a really good one. It's hard to pick against Alabama. They're always ready when the season starts, but it should be a very close contest.
What about Jalen Hurts? Is he a Heisman contender for you this year?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'm going to be a little bit wait and see on his passing, but I expect it to be improved. You know, at the end of last year, they really didn't trust him to throw much, and they certainly didn't want him throwing over the middle of the field because I think they were concerned he was going to turn the ball over. But, you know, I think with an offseason to work on it, he's got a new coordinator. You know, Lane Kiffin is gone.
I heard about that.
Is in.
I heard about that.
Yeah. There's always some news where Lane Kiffin goes.
Right.
But I expect Hurts to be much improved as a passer and still be a very dangerous runner.
Okay, so they are by all measures and metrics the undisputed favorite going into the season again. Who do you think has the best chance to knock off Alabama this year, Pat?
You know, I think Ohio State's going to be really good. I think they're going to have an incredibly good defense, and they've got a real veteran leader in J.T. Barrett on the offensive side. Their passing game should be improved. I expect them to be a lot better with Kevin Wilson as the coordinator there. I think USC loved the way, obviously, they finished the year in the Rose Bowl there, and I think that they're set up for a big season with Sam Darnold as maybe the Heisman front runner at this point. I think Oklahoma State is a team to watch in the Big 12. You know, I think that they talk about firepower on offense. They should really be able to ring it up there. And if they patch some holes in defense, Glenn Spencer's a very good coordinator, underrated there. I think they can win the Big 12.
Yeah, and they've got Tulsa tomorrow night when Ohio State takes on Indiana as well. Any possibility of an upset in either of those games, do you think?
Well, I'm going actually to the Ohio State-Indiana game, and I
Okay.
don't expect an upset there. I think, you know, Ohio State's, I think, a much better team than Indiana, and with Kevin Wilson.
What a story.
He was fired at Indiana as the head coach there last year. If Urban Meyer lets him run it up, he's going to run it up on Indiana. We'll see if they're capable of that. And then, you know, I think Tulsa's really good. Philip Montgomery's a real coach on the rise there. I don't think that will be an easy game for Oklahoma State, but I still think the Cowboys are too good for them.
Well, in terms of, you know, you mentioned Kevin Wilson with Indiana. If he was as horrible to the kids at Indiana as Indiana said he was and fired him, wouldn't you think Indiana would want to run it up on Ohio State best they can tomorrow?
Sure, but I don't anticipate them being able to do that. I'm sure they would love to run it up on Ohio State.
Right. Or stick it to them, I guess.
And being able to are two different things.
Right. Pat Forde joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. So did you see that Jim Harbaugh and Michigan finally did put out their roster for everybody to check out today? Did you see that, Pat?
Hallelujah. Great. We've moved on from from the 2016 roster here just in time. So I know a depth chart would be far too much to ask, but at least now we know who's on the team.
Well, I mean, he's not. I don't think we're going to see a depth chart. But isn't Florida also playing coy with who's playing quarterback there, or are they really going to play 3 quarterbacks against Michigan on Saturday?
I don't think they're going to play 3. They're holding their hand there close to the vest, and I understand why. Obviously, Malik Zaire is a known commodity. Luke Del Rio's a known commodity, but a different one than Malik Zaire. And then they've got the freshman Felipe Franks, who hasn't played in college yet. So, there's probably a good reason for them to keep them guessing, because their offense could look significantly different depending on which of those 3 actually is out there taking the first snaps.
So how do you see Michigan and Florida handling one another on Saturday, Pat?
Well, Florida's got a major self-inflicted problem because they've got 7 players suspended, including their best receiver, Antonio Callaway. So, they are in a difficult position there. I mean, Michigan's replacing a ton of guys from last year's team. I mean, that was a really veteran team. And other than Wilton Speight, there's not a lot coming back, at least in terms of real veteran guys. Rashawn Gary's going to be a superstar on defense, but he's just starting his sophomore year. And there's a lot of holes to fill on that side of the ball. So I would give a slight edge to Michigan, but there's a lot of unknowns going into that game.
Pat Forde of Yahoo Sports joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show. Ask him the poll question, Chris Brockman, that's been sitting out there for an hour. And usually when we ask this, it's the old lightning rod conversation. Go for it.
What's the best conference in college football, Pat? ACC, Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, SEC.
What do you say?
Top to bottom, I'm going to still say the SEC, even though it looks like Alabama and a bunch of schmoes to a degree. But the schmoes are pretty good. So I'm going to give the SEC a narrow edge. The ACC had the best season it's ever had last year. They had a national champion. They had an Orange Bowl champion. They had a Heisman Trophy winner. But I'm not sure that league top to bottom is as deep as the SEC is.
Well, I mean, would you not agree, Pat, that there is a Southeast bias, though, when it comes to college football in our industry? Would you not agree with that?
There's probably some, but I think that was in part generated by winning 7 straight national championships.
True.
I mean, that's putting the money where the mouth is there. But yeah, there's probably been a little bit too much of a hangover from that, of people just kind of automatically ascribing the SEC the bulletproof status. I certainly don't think that applies anymore. Again, I say they are the best league, but not head and shoulders the best, which I think they were for a lot of years.
Well, I mean, that's 5 years gone now, that 7-year run.
Yeah, I mean, we've moved on. I mean, the ACC's won a couple of titles. The Big Ten, Ohio State won one, and I think that it's different times. And I look actually at the coaches in the SEC, and I say, who is the second best coach behind Nick Saban? I think there's a real gap there. So
give me a team that nobody's talking about that might, because that always happens, that winds up in the Final Four. Give me one that can go on and run here and wind up in the Final Four that few people have on their radar screen this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'll stick with Oklahoma State for that. As far as another kind of surprise team, maybe not going to the Final Four, but going to the Big Ten championship game, I like Northwestern to win the West. They've got to go at Wisconsin. They've got to go at Nebraska. But 2 years ago, they went to those places and won both games. They've got a real experienced team. They've got a great running back in Justin Jackson. They've got an improving quarterback in Clayton Thorson, and a lot of good players on defense. So I like Pat Fitzgerald's team. Okay,
so then who do you think they play against in the Big Ten championship game, with Penn State looking as strong as they did at the end of last year? Yeah, and you've got Michigan, Ohio State, all in that same division. What do you got for me, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a great battle between Ohio State and Penn State to win the East, and I'll take Ohio State there. I think that they get Penn State in Columbus this year, and look, Penn State's going to be really good again, but they had a lot of comeback victories. They had some close wins, and I think that they were good, but they were also pretty fortunate, and sometimes it's hard to have that kind of fortune 2 years in a row.
All right, Pat, thanks for the knowledge. We'll chat down the line. Happy football season right back at you. This is it. We're finally here. We made it.
All right. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it.
You got it. That's Pat Forde of Yahoo Sports.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on radio stations across the country and audience.
If you like that video, be sure to download our app, and I'll be sure to help the NFL figure out what a catch is.